All right, so welcome to this very exciting episode of the Elite Athlete Blueprint. Today, I'm super keen to rip into this one, and I think it is going to have, well, I hope it's going to have an impact, hand on heart, right now. If you do hear some wind blowing around, I am outside going for a walk, so I apologize in advance for that, but please bear with me. I've just really worked hard on improving the audio quality of these episodes and invested in a new microphone, and so they will steadily increase. But if you do have more feedback on that, please let me know. Um, as always, feel free to ask as many questions as possible, because this episode is going to be one that every single person that does interact with the Sydney Supersonics, I want them to listen to, because in my mind, it is probably the most important thing that we can do as young men and women, and for that matter, as people, as human beings on this planet. I do tend to get a little bit spiritual with my language at times, but it's only because I feel like it best describes the experience that we're all going through, and it best describes sort of everything that I've learned in the last 10 or so years, longer, let's say 26 years of life, really. But I guess what we're going to be talking about today, is the concept of goal setting. And I've sort of titled the episode, How to Actually Set Goals and Achieve Your Wildest Dreams. So, why is goal setting such a topic that usually causes people's eyes to glaze over? It's become one of the most cliche things of this day and age is, oh, you got to set goals, and everyone's like rolling their eyes. It's like, man, stop telling me I've got to set goals. Like I didn't achieve the last goals I set. I didn't really mean anything. I feel like a lot of people don't connect enough with their goals. And what I'm going to do is hopefully articulate not only exactly why goal setting is so crucial, but articulate a complete process that we can go through based on human physiology, neurochemistry, science, and my own life experience in trying to achieve some pretty big things. And I'm not saying that I have achieved like anything amazing at this stage. I've only achieved what I've achieved. Finishing high school, going to university, getting a university degree, playing, internationally for basketball, and continuing to progress and build every day. But I'm nowhere near where I wish to go, and I don't want to sit here and come from a place of like, I'm awesome, I've done everything that anyone should ever do, and I'm the world leading expert on goals. No, this is purely just my own experience on goal setting from all of the reading that I've done. And I can tell you that I've definitely put in the 10,000 hours of reading for, um, I guess, like human achievement and goal setting. And 3-4 years ago, I did a presentation and a speech on the science of human achievement, and I've continued to build my knowledge day in and day out. I've read close to 1,000 books in my life, and as you can see through the resources section of this lecture in the Elite Athlete Blueprint module, you'll see some of the great books that I've read that I'm linking to, and some of the really useful summaries that other people have created. And I just want this to be the ultimate resource for any person seeing this to be able to interact with and set better goals, whether they're a young athlete or they're just someone who's stumbled across this on YouTube or the podcasting platform that they've come across. And I wanted to have every single thing that I can think of for someone to be able to set meaningful goals. And I don't think you will need any other resources to be able to set a goal that will completely change the trajectory of your life and will come from within you, to help you give back to this planet, the unique gifts that you have within you. And forgive me if that's a little bit esoteric for those who are in this just for basketball, but I firmly believe, and there's a great quote that came from the Active Mind speech, which was actually, and this was Taylor Allen from the Deep Game who listed the quote, but it was actually from a book called Fountainhead. And in this book, it sort of talks about the idea that, I haven't actually read the book, but I know the quote is, I, as a teacher, cannot tell you what to do. That is up to you. I can only guide you to achieve a result that I've achieved. And I'm butchering the quote, but basically the summary of it is that the goals that you set and the objectives that you achieve are within you. Only you can decide what they're going to be, and it's not in anyone else's realm to tell you what to do, because inherently within you, you have an innate sense of what it is that is best for you and what you want to be doing and achieving. And that's where this goal setting process comes into things. While this is the elite athlete blueprint, and I think wanting to become an elite athlete is a very meaningful goal in and of itself, what I've found in my own experience of trying to work towards becoming an elite athlete is that there's much more to the picture of becoming an elite athlete than simply sporting performance in and of itself. And the journey of becoming an elite athlete allows us to learn so much about life and so much about ourselves and so much about this experience of the world that we may find that we learn so much that we actually change our goalposts, and that the goal that we're aiming towards in the process of becoming an elite athlete, which we once felt was meaningful for us, changes as many trainers, skill trainers and coaches and people who are doing amazing things in the world have done. A few examples that come to mind is someone like George Raveling, who is now in his 80s, but he initially wanted to become a professional basketball player, played college and realized, look, I'm not going to play professionally, but then became an amazing coach and was actually the first sort of coach to lead a collegiate team to beat the USA national team in an exhibition basketball game. The same thing with Paul Fabreitz, a skill trainer from Arizona. PJF Performance is his business, and I mean he's a complete game changer in the basketball industry. In my opinion, the foremost basketball strength and conditioning coach, alongside Ben Patrick, knees over toes guy. And these are all guys who have wanted to play professional basketball, really given it their all, and failed. But within them, they knew that studying human physiology and studying human performance was something that they were really passionate about and they were able to achieve. And there are countless examples of other people in other fields, whether it's art or music, people who wanted to be a professional basketball player but never could, and then ended up into other fields because of their pursuit of excellence. And so I'm kind of sort of waffling on a little bit, I guess, but I want to set the context to say that whatever goal that you set for yourself, you can use this framework to work towards that. And I firmly believe this is the most important thing that we can do on this planet, to be able to give back to everyone and everything that exists. We all have unique gifts. We all have things that we can give to the world. And for some of us, it's not up to us to decide what it is that we need to do for others. There are a lot of sort of self-righteous people who suggest that you should be donating money to charity, or you should be volunteering your time to charity, and that's the only way to give back. But for some of us, that might not be our best use of time. If we were to look at Elon Musk, for example, if he was to donate his time to charity, that would be a complete disservice to humanity, because his time is so precious that there would be no one working on his electric cars that have the power to completely transform the world in terms of the way we use energy. And there'd be no one being able to lead the colonization of Mars. So I think that's an example of sort of, he innately within himself feels like that is his compelling goal to help humanity reach Mars, which is crazy. But that's his drive, and that's the thing that he's motivated to do, and that's the goal that he set for himself, and he's working to achieve that. And then that's giving him a sense of purpose, and I'll talk about scientifically what I think that means, and the actual scientific mechanisms behind that. But for him, that is the most meaningful thing that he can do. And if he was to devote his time to a homeless shelter or a charity down the road or whatever, that would be wasted time for humanity. And I'm not saying that it's not worthwhile to spend that time in a charitable environment, because for some people, that will be their calling and they'll be amazing at that. But I mean, I don't know if you've ever heard Elon Musk talk. There's some great interviews with him on the Joe Rogan show. If you search on YouTube, you'll be able to find those. But I don't think he'd be particularly good in that environment because he's a little bit awkward. But that's purely because that's the way his mind works. He's very computational and scientifically minded. And so we're much better off getting someone who's more personable and really likes to integrate at a ground level with people to do that kind of role in the homeless shelter, and someone who will get purpose and meaning from that. And then they're able to give back into the world in their way. And someone else who makes a lot of money and wants to give back will be able to donate the money to that charity. If that's something they feel compelled to get behind and support. We're all compelled by different things and different prerogatives and different initiatives. And so I firmly believe that when we're motivated and we're sufficiently motivated and we've set a meaningful enough goal for ourselves, even if it is a selfish goal like achieving elite athleticism, by the time that we understand the science of human motivation and drive and the fact that we've reached this position in society, is absolute proof that as human beings we sort of work to look out for each other and look out for human beings in general. And anyone that thinks that all humans are evil just needs to look at history and why have people built things and created societies, or so they can benefit the people around them, and we're inherently social creatures, so we want to be able to benefit those that are around us. And I guess you might say there's been wars and things like that and people stripping each other down, and well, that's because of a bunch of other sort of mechanisms to do with fear and insecurity and not being sure. That really affects people's ability to, I guess, interact with each other. But again, I'm digressing. I just want to make that point to articulate the fact that once we are sufficiently motivated towards a purposeful goal, even if it is selfish initially, we will give back to the world, and we will find ways to learn about how we can give back to the world through that and through the understanding of how to achieve that. And I feel like almost all people who are successful give back to the world in some way, if not every person. Even Dan Bilzerian does really amazing things for army veterans and people who are really struggling. And he would be considered the ultimate hedonist in this day and age. So I feel like it's not up to us to judge. But I don't want to go too far down the line of that, because that is a bit of a digression. So with all of that said, this is really the ultimate guide to setting a goal for yourself and to working towards a purpose. And I firmly believe that having a purpose is the most important thing that we can do. And so that sort of sets up the context for how I like to think about goal setting and the most important way to set goals, in my opinion. And it really is, we want to make sure that we set our expectations right for exactly what it is that we want to achieve. And the biggest principle with goal setting, and I link to a number of books in here, and there's a book called The Magic of Thinking Big. There's a book called, and that's a classic, Magic of Thinking Big in the 70s, a book called The 10X Rule by Grant Cardone. And if you ever want to set your frame of reference for thinking big, then just watch any number of videos from Grant Cardone and you will realize that everything that you've set out to achieve in your life is probably not be thinking big enough at all. So the principle essentially is aim so big. And there was this idea, the big, hairy, audacious goal, the BHAG. And in the little PDF summary of interacting with the Supersonics and how to get the most out of the Elite Athlete Blueprint, I talk about the BHAG and the big, hairy, audacious goal. And really, I will provide a little text summary of this goal setting process as well, because I do want to dive deep into things like initiating it with what I spoke about at the beginning, about the context of goal setting and why purpose is so important. And so this is going to be a long episode, but I really want to go through and really provide a good case for the importance of thinking so insanely big that you never thought you would have achieved it, because I firmly believe that's the only way we're going to progress as a society. And that's what we need. We need more people who are living on purpose, who don't care about superficial things, who only care about really benefiting the innate sense of what they feel like they can contribute to this world, and it's sort of how I've found myself of late, and I know it's true because this is what everyone sort of talks about, and I know a lot of people who are working towards this, and so I think this concept is the 10x rule. I think is a good way to articulate it, or the big, hairy, audacious goal. Um, the concept behind the big, hairy, audacious goal, or the BHAG, is think to yourself, sort of, what is it that you want to achieve? What if in 10 years' time you were working to achieve something? If you're young, let's use the context of basketball to start with. So, if you're 13 years old, in 10 years' time, where do you want to be? For most people who want to play basketball, it's going to be, I want to be in the NBA. And that is a big, hairy, audacious goal. It is so audacious for most people in Australia. There's like 8 players in the NBA. But it's a worthwhile goal to set out to achieve. And if you've listened to some of the original podcast episodes, you'll see me talking about why, it is important to aim big. And even if you aimed to make the NBA and you never actually really, like, people are like, oh, you're never going to do that. And you never did reach it. But if you tried to, look at Steph Curry. The analogy I used was, if you tried to be Steph Curry and you did everything that Steph Curry did and you could play like Steph Curry, no matter what kind of athlete you were, if you can shoot the ball like Steph Curry, you're going to be playing professional. And so, if you're aiming sort of 10 years down the line and you aim so big, so hairy, so audacious with your goal that you never think you're going to be able to achieve it, that is where you want to aim with it. And sort of the 10x rule is another really good way to think about your shorter term goals. Like, I think the big, hairy, audacious goal is great because you can set like this big target for where you want to reach. And for me, I guess it's good to provide examples for this. For me, my example of my big, hairy, audacious goal, I've kind of actually broken it down into like, what is the goal for me when I'm 80 or when I'm 60 or whatever. And really, my big, hairy, audacious goal, or some people might describe it as a vision, is my vision for my life is to be able to maximize human potential. And that's sort of what I started this whole thing about. I realized as someone, when I was younger, from sort of the age of, like, I guess 5 to 12, I really wasn't comfortable with my body and my weight. And I feel like I was overweight, even though looking back at it, I probably was just pretty normal. I was a bit bigger than most kids in terms of my weight, but like I would have been classed as overweight, but it wasn't morbidly obese or anything like that. But it really affected my confidence, and it affected a number of different ways. And I guess, like, I never really felt like I was able to excel or achieve anything. And now that I understand sort of motivation and the science behind that, it makes sense. I felt like, to touch on the concepts of motivation, I had a real sort of lack of autonomy. I wasn't able to direct my own life. I wasn't able to control the body that I was in because I really wanted to look like, I used to watch Dragon Ball Z a lot, so I wanted to look like the people in Dragon Ball Z, which is absolutely ridiculous. No one's going to look like that. You have to be a freak to look like that. But I sort of lacked that autonomy. I felt like I lacked a sense of mastery. I didn't know that I could get better at things just by doing them. I felt like I was just kind of average, and I was kind of awkward socially. Didn't like taking my shirt off in public. Like, I grew up on the beach and I couldn't surf because I didn't have the confidence to get in the water. And there was all these other kids around me who had surfed from a young age, and I used to be kind of jealous about that because, like, they'd get their shirt off at the beach and go for a surf, and I was like, like, I'll never be able to surf because I'm big, and I was like 60 kilos in year 3, so I was tall, but also quite solid, muscular, but also carried a little bit of extra weight, and so I was just this big sort of awkward kid. And I'm very happy about that now because it means that I'm able to play basketball being larger than average, but at the time it affected my confidence. And now, now that I realize that all you need to do is just put time into something and you'll get better at it, like, I have no issues with that. I love surfing. I go surfing regularly, and I really understand that I can sort of do anything provided I just understand what it takes to get good at it. And for that little pause there, but this is one of the advantages of sort of recording a podcast while multitasking and getting out and going for a beautiful walk in the sunshine, but then getting a bloody phone call halfway through. So I apologise, but again, that's really what Supersonics is all about. No excuses and having a goal for yourself and seeing yourself being able to help maximise human potential and help a lot of people out and just making the most of the time that you have. So I hope this serves as a little bit of a motivation in the short term. But as I was saying, really, and this is the ethos of the Sonics, is just making it happen with the time that you have, and making the most of the time that you have. And this is an example of a concept that I'll talk about later, which is called leverage. And leverage is really just in physics. We have levers, which is essentially you can apply force to an object, and the longer the moment arm of that object, much easier to describe with an image, but the longer the moment arm of that object, the more force you'll be able to apply through a smaller amount of effort, and that is really leverage in action. And so leverage is one of the most important concepts that we have, and listening to or recording a podcast while going for a walk is a perfect example of leverage, because for me, it allows me to get out in the sunshine. It allows me to record a really important audio of good quality. It allows me to go for a walk, get a bit of activity in, while also really progressing this forward and hopefully helping people in the process. So anyway, leverage aside, to talk about the process of getting better at anything. And what I was speaking about before was like, I just was talking about, okay, now I feel like I can surf because I put the time in and I understood, what it took to become better at surfing, and I just didn't really care about the process of knowing that I wasn't good at it, because like anything, you just have to gradually accept where you're at now and understand it's a scientific process of adaptation. And really that's the key to anything, as I talk about so much. And this is one thing I learned, or the biggest thing I learned in my sports science degree, is that as human beings, we can adapt to anything. And so to go back to that core concept of we can adapt to anything, and then linking that into the importance of setting such a big goal. So for me, you got a bit of history about why I sort of set out to want to maximize human potential, and where that motivation came from, and where my sort of burning desire and motivation towards achieving that, that long-term aim for my life. Sort of by the time I'm 80, I'd love to say that I've really done my bit to help maximize human potential. And I have to give full credit to the people that are already doing this. Guys like Ido Portal with his movement stuff. Some probably more relevant ones for the audiences today is a guy like Tim Ferriss with his podcast and with all of the amazing information that he's put out. Insane. Tim Ferriss, the impact he's had on my life is absolutely nuts. I wouldn't be able to do this without him. There's also Tom Bilyeu from Impact Theory and Quest Nutrition. Amazing interviews. And if you guys are like ever short of info from us, or you need something to look towards for that constant source of inspiration and motivation, then don't look any further than the Impact Theory. I haven't even listened to anywhere near the amount of episodes that are published there. Tim Ferriss Show and London Real. There's no reason why every single time you go to a training session, and this is one thing that the Elite Athlete Blueprint will serve to do, is it'll serve you in that you're going to have a constant source of inspiration and motivation, while also learning what you need to learn to achieve things, because every single podcast isn't just about motivation. It's actually about learning and furthering yourself, because someone who's achieved amazing things in their life knows exactly what it takes to achieve those things. And there's so many elements that go into achieving greatness in anything. And hopefully I can provide a small bit of that through the Elite Athlete Blueprint. But I'm constantly learning every single day. And so every single podcast that you listen to from a really smart person who is an expert in their field of reference will allow you to get a little bit better, and you'll probably learn some things that I haven't learned. And so I'd love for this to spark the catalyst for people, when they're on their way to training, and this is sort of what I talked about, why I created this whole resource, is when they're on their way to training, they whack on a podcast, or they start reading a book or listening to something that's going to inspire them to learn a bit more and then get like a little bit better at what they're doing. and it gives them the right sort of motivated mindset going into that training, so they can not only get the most out of that training and be prepped to really excel in their training, but also, they're learning a little bit more, and they're able to come back better next time, and they can contribute more to society or whatever. So that's kind of like one of the really cool things that I think we can provide here. And I know for me, when I go to training, I love to listen to something that's sort of motivating and causes me to sort of work harder. And I think that's what Impact Theory can do. It's what the Tim Ferriss Show can do. And really, that's my aim for the Elite Athlete Blueprint, is that it's this massive resource, and there are some key ideas that we get across, such as this one. But then once you've got the fundamentals down, and you've got your training program, and you're actually regularly practicing and training, then it's really just about sort of refining and sharpening the axe. Just getting better at the little things that really separate the elite from those who are not elite. But in everything, there's an 80-20 principle. Sort of, there's 20% of things that produces 80% of the results. And I've talked a lot about that in some of the other episodes. And so, and again, I'm going to ramble a lot here, but it's all really connected ideas and really important ideas. And I want everyone to be able to hear this in its entirety, so that they can look at the summary, make quick actions on the summary, and really make it happen for themselves, and then check back into here once they sort of start to layer the knowledge of everything that I've learned about sort of achievement and goal setting, and really just get the whole picture in this audio. And as I talk about, I really recommend sort of speeding up these audios. The human brain can decode information much faster than it can output it. And, you can, depending on how fresh you are and how mentally sharp you are, if this is first thing in the morning, you'll be able to listen to this at triple speed, no problems. And you will be able to definitely digest it all. And I think it actually helps with comprehension, because the human voice is quite slow, and it causes, when not at a speed, it sort of causes your mind to drift. And so I definitely recommend speeding this up, particularly because I'm Australian, and as Australians, we talk quite slow because of our pronunciation. But anyway, I am digressing once again. But that idea of setting a massive, massive goal and having this target that you're aiming for is so, so important, because then, and this is what Kobe Bryant talks about in a lot of his interviews, then every single thing that you're doing and that you're looking to achieve has, I guess, like a guide or a direction that you're headed towards. And so, like Kobe used to say, well, I want to be the best basketball player on the planet. And then every single thing he did in his life was like, okay, how is this going to help me become a better basketball player? Whether it was learning Italian so he could expand the cognitive capacities of his mind to be able to, increase the sort of neural networks he had, and sharpen his brain so that he could process basketball better, or whether it was reading books and understanding stories to improve motivation and see things in a different light, or whether it was his actual training, whether it was tap dancing or soccer. Everything that we do can connect to our ability to play basketball. And if we don't feel like it's connecting to our ability to play basketball, and it's a positive activity, such as learning or eating well or reading or whatever, it's because we don't understand why it connects, and we're not going to be able to get the most out of that if we don't understand why it connects. Like, I guarantee you, if you do well at school and you learn science and you learn English and you learn all of the subjects that are being studied at school and at university for that matter, you will be a better basketball player, just because it allows you to see things in a new way. It allows you to learn about the actual realities of this world. And you can make better decisions and do things that actually produce results better. And so it's without question that every single thing that we do in our lives can improve our ability to play basketball if they're positive habits. And then it's up to us, once we've got that goal and what we're aiming for, whether it is basketball or whether it is sort of maximizing human potential, or whether it's, you want to be the best musician on the planet, then we can start to learn about and acknowledge how each decision we make is either moving us closer toward or further away from our ultimate goal. And so that's the power of setting a big, hairy, audacious goal, and sort of the 10x rule. So the big hairy audacious goal in the actual book, I believe it's a 10-year period they recommend. So I kind of esoterically have said I want to maximize human potential. But then when I strip it back to sort of 10 years, what would I like to be doing in 10 years? Well, I'd love to be playing 3-on-3 basketball professionally and playing for Australia. I'd love to be able to do that, and I'd love to have the most successful 3-on-3 team in the country. I'd love to be a part of that, and I'd love to really just take what we're learning and doing through the Elite Athlete Blueprint to the people who need it, and the athletes who were like me, who didn't understand the science of achievement and everything like that, and need it to be able to get to that next level. And so while I have goals in other areas of my life, and there's a good rule of thumb like for setting goals, it's a Warren Buffett rule actually. It's called the 5-25 method, and what he recommends is write down all of the things that you want to be really great at in your life and all the things you want to achieve, and then write down sort of 25 of them, and then pick the 5 most important to you, and then don't even look at the other 20. So you write down 25 things that you want to work towards. One might be basketball, one might be, I want to make $1 million, one might be, I want to get a girlfriend, one might be, I want to surf, or one might be, I want to travel the world, and another might be, I want to start a business. And then, even though they might all help each other in some way, what you need to do is you're going to really focus on a short number of things, and this is where most people go wrong. What you need to do is cross out the others and avoid them at all costs. Even though, say, for example, starting a business might help you make $1 million, well, there are plenty of ways to make $1 million, and I'd argue that starting a business is probably not the easiest way to do it. Whatever the easiest way to do it is, like, that's up to you to decide. But for that 5-25 rule, it's really powerful to allow us to sort of categorize what it is that we need to do. Now, with that concept of the 5-25 rule, we then have 5 sort of areas that we want to work towards, and it's probably worth setting aside a big, hairy, audacious goal for each of those 5 things. And we're going to have one that we're sort of focusing on and categorizing as the most important. For me, I guess probably the number one thing that I'm sort of working towards is trying to be an Australian level basketball player and play for the country. And whether or not that happens is another story in and of itself, but at least I've aimed for it, and at least I'm doing everything that I can to get there. And I might never get there, but hey, at least I'm getting better at basketball in the process and enjoying actually playing and doing everything I can to be as good as I can. And it's only going to help me reach more people, because they're going to be like, oh, well, everything he's teaching us is actually working or not. That's sort of the power of aiming big. And I don't always tell a lot of people that as well. It's kind of hard for me to sit here and say that, because I'm not at that level at the moment. I've really been nowhere near that throughout my life, but I've definitely gotten a lot better since I really started focusing in and cutting out the rest of the distractions in my life, and getting clearer on what it was that I was after. But I've got a long way to go, and so this is me sort of using my own examples to hopefully inspire people, but really just articulate how this process of achievement can work. Now, with that 5-25 rule, there are other things that I'm sort of working towards in my career, and with the basketball club, and with my ability to travel, and I've got that very clear for myself over time. And I guess the other thing to talk about with goal setting is that it's not just a one-off process. It's not just something that you do once and then you never look at it again. You have to check back on these goals every single day. And this is where people talk about affirmation. There's a really loud truck coming past, so forgive me if you can't quite hear me. But if they talk about affirmations, it's a really important thing. And this is one thing in the book that I linked called Think and Grow Rich that they talk about a lot. Affirmations are critical because it allows you to check back in on your goals every single day and remind yourself of what you're working towards, why you're working towards it, and then give yourself a bit of feedback as to, have you done what you need to do to achieve that? And this is one thing that I'll talk about later on in this audio, is the concept of feedback and checking back in on your goals and having realistic milestones. And it's going to be a constant process of iteration. It's not just a one-off thing. And so once you've got that 5-25 rule, and then your sort of 5 big, hairy, audacious goals, then you can start to use the 10x rule. So in 10 years to achieve that big, hairy, audacious goal, what do you need to do, or what do you think you need to do in the next year to achieve that? And then what do you think you need to do in the next 6 months to achieve that? And then what do you think you need to do in the next 90 days to achieve that? And so you strip it back. What can be useful, I think, is to say, look, where would I like to be in 3 years? I think is a good target, because anything longer than that's a bit far away to really get down to the nitty gritty. And then, I mean, some people will break it down into a year and then 6 months and then 90 days. And that's how they sort of talk about it in the book. But I've personally sort of resonated with having a rough set of aims for the year, knowing that they're probably going to change a little bit, and then just going, next 90 days, what are the things I need to do? And then really just doing them. And if you've got strong habits, chances are you're already going to be doing a lot of the basic things. And then the 90-day targets are more exactly that. They're targets. They're things that you're sort of reaching towards actual objective lag measures, as we call them. A lag measure is a result, and a lead measure is an action that you need to take to get that result. So, for example, if you need to lose 5 kilos, then the lag measure would be lose 5 kilos, and the lead measure would be to, exercise every day, for example. And so, what I like to do is break it down like that and go, okay, in a year's time, I want to be, let's say, I want to be playing in a challenger for 3-on-3 basketball. Okay, well, in the next 90 days, what do I need to do to be able to play in that challenger? And then, okay, well, what if the country's not opened up, and what if there are no challenges? Have I failed? Or like, and you can pivot with that. You know, you can say, oh, well, look, if there's no challenges opened up, then I'm not going to consider it a failure. If I don't play in a challenger, I'm going to decide on an objective that is equally as closer to that date if it doesn't look like it's going to be real or realistic. And this is where people say, oh, well, set good goals because you want to make sure you can achieve them. But I firmly believe in a pivot, and that's why if you're into startups and business, any great business, we'll talk about the concept of pivoting. Any business in the world has been a pivoting business. Any successful business has always pivoted. And all you need to do is start listening to startup stories about, what a pivot is, and you realize that the initial idea people start out with isn't always what maps up with reality. But if you start to work towards something, then you can work with reality to create something that is equally as meaningful for you based on how you feel inside and internally. And this is why I sort of talk about our goals have to come within us, and why we need to be constantly looking back at them, because they're going to change. But it's really more about the journey than the destination anyway. So who cares if it changes, because you've had an awesome time doing it. You've really sort of ticked off the boxes of the happiness hypothesis, which is a book I'll link. But essentially, the happiness hypothesis and the concept of drive and motivation. Like, really, at the end of the day, as human beings, we're simply a big chemical factory. We're one closed chemical system that's governed by a whole series of chemical reactions. And our brain is literally just a bunch of chemical reactions. And feeling good is literally chemical reactions. That's why people love drugs. That's why people get into drugs. They like coffee, they like illicit drugs, and they like things like caffeine and things like that. Sorry, tobacco, because they're all just ways of artificially manipulating the chemicals within our body. So, and we can do that non-artificially by working with the principles of human motivation and human physiology, which is sort of, when we exercise, we release endorphins because it's a rewarding activity that we've evolved to be rewarded by because it's positive for our body. But more so, the two concepts that I'm talking about specifically is internal motivation, because it feels good to be internally motivated. And this comes from, I talked about it before, but comes from a book called Drive by Daniel Pink, which is sort of, we need autonomy, which is essentially we need the desire to direct our own lives. We need to be able to be in charge of what it is that we're doing. And I feel like that innately comes from within us. And that is what a lot of people talk about when they talk about God's gift. Like, we've all been given God's gift. We'll have something that we're suited towards. And whether it is from something that we're born with or something that we've developed throughout our life, there's evidence showing that imprinting is what happens when we're sort of 12, from the age of about 11 to 13. And it's where our brain and our habits are imprinted with the things that we're focused on in our life. And I know for me, that was the period where I said, I'm going to really try and change my life, and I'm going to change my body and how I feel. And I started eating healthy and exercising a lot more. And as you can tell by the start of this episode, like, it's really the thing that I enjoy the most and am most motivated by is understanding how I can learn more about optimizing just human performance and human experience. And so there's that sense of autonomy, and then there's the mastery. So we have the urge, once we have that autonomy, we have the urge to be really, really good at the things that we're working towards being good at. And this is where the 525 rule comes into things, because if we set a goal, then if we don't set goals, we're going to be driven towards being good at what we do in our daily lives, regardless, because that's the way that human beings work. We're result-driven creatures, and we always strive to be good at something. Like, even if it was a slave back in the days when slavery was a thing, slaves were very, very good at what they did. But it wasn't sort of autonomous for them. That wasn't what they wanted to do. But regardless, some of them were masters of their craft. And regardless of what it is that we're working towards, if we do something regularly, we're going to want to be good at it. It's just like anytime someone says, you get 2 5-year-olds out there and say, right, first, let's have a race. First to the end of the path wins. And they're both going to go all out they want to win. They want to be the best at it. And it's just an innate thing within us as human beings to want to be good at what we're doing. But the reason why we need to have a goal, and a goal that really means something to us, is because, well, if we don't set that goal, then we're just going to try and be good at the things that we have in our daily life. But firstly, we're not going to sort of push through the hard parts to be good at those things. But secondly, like, we're going to be being good at something that someone else has dictated for us, and that society has dictated for us. And that's how marketing and advertising and sales works. It works by having a set of defaults around how society sort of tells us that we should be, and then they play on our ability and our drive for motivation. And this the third one, which is, well, purpose, and there's also connectedness within that. So we need to be connected to the people around us, but they play on those innate desires within the human mind, and they cause us to be sort of motivated towards mastery of things that we don't even care about. But we think we care about them because we haven't set meaningful goals for ourselves. And so this is why I feel like it's so important to have a sense of purpose, because it takes us away from needing to resort to alcohol and drugs and other negative things like that. Because when we don't have a sense of purpose, it's tempting to do those things because it feels good. But for me, I'm like, well, I don't really want to do that because it takes me further away from achieving my goal of helping, optimize human performance. But also it takes me away from my goal of playing for the country in basketball. Like, if I go out drinking, I'm not going to be as well recovered the next day for when I train again, when I play. And scientifically, I can maybe get away with it, or I feel I can get away with it and still perform well one day. But if I keep doing it, then it's definitely going to detract from my performance. And that's a full-blown conclusion. We know that through science. And so if you don't have a meaningful goal, then you're just going to not see the decisions that are actually detracting from the things that you want to be doing. And that's why I think most people kind of self-sabotage and don't achieve what they can, because they don't actually know what their goal is, or they don't connect with it enough. And then they make unknowing decisions that aren't helping them towards achieving what they innately within themselves really want to achieve, but they just haven't actually sat down to define it and work towards it. And the third sense of sort of motivation from drive and Daniel Pink's book is the concept of purpose. So we have a yearning to do what we do in service of something larger than ourselves. And that is that concept of, we have an innate thing within us, and it's an innate drive to want to be connected to a sense of purpose beyond us, whether it's people raising a child. That's one of the things that gives people a lot of purpose, or it's giving back to charity, or it's building a society. Even the most bloodthirsty rulers in the world still wanted to create an empire, not just for themselves, but create an empire so that they felt good because they could give back to others. And we're inherently social creatures. So we're always going to be driven by a sense of purpose and connection to things greater than ourselves for a cause, Even if it's Hitler, the most evil person on the planet, he still felt like he was socially connected to those like him. And it obviously is a flawed pattern of sort of thinking, because what he did was absolutely atrocious, and God hopes that we never ever get to anything like that ever again. But there was still an innate sense of, you know, purpose towards bringing forth what he thought was his goal, and it was connected to others. And so, whether we like it or not, you know, we're going to be governed by helping other people. So, the other concept that I want to talk about behind motivation is from the happiness hypothesis. And sorry to take such a dark, deep turn there, but I want to use examples from, you know, the most extreme forms of humanity, so that I can really hammer this case home that this is the science of achievement. And once you understand these things, then you will achieve sort of everything that you want to achieve in your life. The other thing is the progress principle. And this comes from the happiness hypothesis, but essentially, you know, our chemical system and our neurochemistry and our neurobiology is governed by, like I said, a feedback loop. So the brain, you know, responds to progress, it notices progress, and it creates a positive dopamine signal, which then encourages us to do that thing that we got better at again. And we all know what this feels like. You notice a bit of progress in something, whether it's a test result or even if it's a stupid game on your phone. If you notice constant progress, this is what all video games are sort of based on, you're going to be motivated and you're going to want to keep playing it because you've gotten better at it. And this is the progress principle at play. And so it's like, okay, well, you can use that to your advantage for your goal setting. And, you know, some of the smartest minds on earth really understand human biology, and forgive me if this is a little bit loud, but human biology and human systems. And they simply know that, okay, well, we're a chemical system and we're going to be manipulated by certain things. And so all they do is just set up their lives in a way that they can make sure that they're going to be as happy as possible, because, you know, they've designed things to make sure they achieve them. They've designed things to work towards a goal that they're aiming for. They've designed things to notice that they're getting progress, and, you know, they make sure that they're able to just continue showing themselves that they're getting better, that they're masters of their domain, that they have a sense of purpose. And, you know, in that way they're happy, and they create this positive ascension of compounding interest. I'm going to put the compounding interest graph in this because it's so important. But compounding interest is essentially the idea that if we get 1% better every day over a long period of time, compound interest is known as sort of the eighth wonder of the world, and it's a real strong natural phenomenon. And it's basically like, once you get better at something, then you've not only improved your sort of capacity at that stage, but you've also added to how good you are. And so over time, it sort of rises up exponentially. So while it might go quite slowly to begin with, you're actually, every time you perform something, you're getting better at the level of performance you were at the last time you performed. And so, you know, while 100 days, people might be like, oh, well, if you get 1% better every day over 100 days, you're 100% better. That's not actually true. You're actually like 130% better, because you've gotten better and then that compounds. And so over a period of, and this is like they talk about with finances, compounding interest is really applied the most with finances. That's how people can, you know, be worth, say, $1 million, and then they have that invested over a period of 20 years. And if they earn 8% on that $1 million over a period of 20 years, they're actually worth, like, I guess 8% would sort of, people would think, oh, you know, you'd be worth over 20 years, you'd be worth like 3 million, but you'd actually probably be worth more like 5 million, because of the power of compounding interest. And I'll put the little graph that really visually represents that, but it is one of the most important things to our progress, and why constant progress is so important towards goal setting. And so to go back to the original idea, that 10x rule, when we set our milestones for 90 days, a really good rule of thumb is to think in terms of quantum leaps. And this is where the 10x rule comes into things. And the 10x rule is so important because if we set a goal for ourselves and we achieve it, we've kind of actually failed, because it means that it was within our reach. And this is where, like, you know, having that big esoteric aim for 10 years down the line, like you want to be in the NBA, for example. And then if you go, okay, what do I need to do in the next 90 days to play in the NBA? say you're like 13 years old, and then you go, oh, I need to make my high school team, or yeah, make the A's for my age group or whatever. And then you'd be like, okay, well, if I was to 10x that, what would I need to be able to do to 10x that goal? It's like, all right, I need to make the state team for my age. And you think, there's no way I'm going to make the state team. But even if it might be a completely unrealistic goal to say, I'm going to make the state team just in 90 days. Different actions to try and reach the state team compared to if you're just reaching your high school team. So if you're like, all right, I'm going to reach my high school team, you're going to just play against the kids who are in your high school team. Whereas if you go, I'm going to make the state team, you're probably going to look up, okay, what do I need to do to make the state team? You're going to find the best players in the area who have made the state team. You're going to speak to coaches and ask them, what do you need to do to make the state team? And then you're going to train completely differently and have a completely different frame of reference. And that's the power of the 10x rule. You're going to do the things that you need to do to take a quantum leap, which is like essentially just going so far that you sort of reach another level. And that's where I like to use it and just set ridiculously audacious goals and targets, because I know that I'm probably not going to achieve them. But at least if I've aimed for it, then I've really sort of done the things that I would need to do to reach that ridiculous aim, which has then got me 5 times further towards my end goal of playing in the NBA compared to just 1 times further when I was like, I'm just going to play in my high school team. And this is one thing to keep in mind, like you can't be too upset by failure, because failure should be the goal. And this is like any good, successful person will say, failure should be the goal. Failure is the goal, because if you strive to fail, then you get awesome feedback about why you failed, and you've stretched your capacity beyond what you can actually achieve. Whereas if you achieve it, then wow, great, you've achieved something and you feel good about yourself, but you've only gotten 1 time better. Whereas if you just go 10 times better and you don't achieve it, you're probably 8 times better. And this is where that quote, shoot for the moon, because if you fall, you land amongst the stars, comes into play. And so like we can get specific about the exact way to set these goals, and this is what we're here for as the Sonics coaches, is so we can help you 10x your goals, and we can help you take quantum leaps, because quantum physics and quantum mechanics is something I'm really, really passionate about. And I think the biggest thing that people forget is like, I think the quantum leap idea is essentially like best represented by the fact that there's so much that we don't know. There's an effect called the Dunning-Kruger effect, and there's so much that we don't know about achievement. And if you asked Kobe Bryant what you needed to do to be like Kobe Bryant, he would give you a completely different answer to what you think you need to do without actually researching what Kobe would say to achieve Kobe Bryant levels of performance. Kobe knows exactly what you would need to do, but you don't, because you're not Kobe. And so there's like, Kobe's got 10, 20,000, 30,000, rest in peace, Kobe, of course. I just use him a lot as an example because he's an epitome of elite performance, in my opinion. Kobe knows what would need to be done, and he's got 20 more years of experience of exactly what needs to be done than you do. So he's going to have a better answer than you. And so thinking in terms of, okay, well, what would Kobe say, is an example of how you can take a quantum leap. And Kobe would probably, people talk about Kobe did 6 hours every day for six months straight. And I don't know whether or not that's true, but he might say that, And for you might be like, I've just got to work on my dribbling and make the high school team and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, no, you're not doing that. You need to make the national team to be like me. You need to be able to train 6 hours a day. You need to get yourself into a camp with the best coaches in the world. You need to start strength and conditioning now. You need to eat well, blah, blah, blah. And the Elite Athlete Blueprint is essentially providing you everything that science knows and that we know, and we're going to continue adding to it and getting the world experts on to allow you to take those quantum leaps and take the next step. And quantum physics really is just about, there's sort of levels to anything, and the more we manifest and the more we think about what we want to achieve, the closer we'll be able to go towards creating that, because quantum physics really dictates that everything is energy and our thoughts are energy. And so by thinking about something more, we're able to actually have an effect on that becoming reality. And there's tons of information that I'll put into that later. But I guess it's sort of an emerging field of science, and there's a lot of associated resources in the Elite Athlete Blueprint that sort of expand on this a bit more. But without going too far into the tangent, I guess you just kind of have to take our word for it now, and you can do your own research where you want. But if you just type in sort of the quantum science of achievement into Google, then you'll find all the information or a lot of information about it. But that is why the idea of the 10x rule is so important, is it allows us to continually take those quantum leaps so that we can get, instead of getting 1 time better, we can get 8 times better. And we just accept failure as a normal. And this is why people talk about failure as being so important. And then we fail and we take it on board as feedback, and then we go, all right, well, awesome, I've gotten 8 times better, and I'm still closer to my goal. I've landed amongst the stars. I'm having an awesome time. I didn't make the state team, but hey, I'm the best player in my high school team, and I'm actually getting better than what I would have gotten if I had have made the state team anyway. And I'm scoring 30 points a game or whatever, to go back to that example of the 13-year-old who's tried to make the state team, and then next year they make the state team and they're killing it. They're much better off. And then they're making the state team and they go, oh well, let's make the national team. Don't make the national team, but hey, they get a college offer at the age of 15. Who cares about the national team? They're playing college, and then they're in college. They're like, oh, I want to be the best shooter at college. They're not the best shooter in NCAA, but they're the second best. And then they get recruited to go to the NBA, and then they're the next Steph Curry. That's how that kind of stuff works. Obviously, an exaggerated example, but that's really the power of just setting ridiculously audacious goals, because you have this esoteric vision for what you want to do in your life. And for me, I've used that concept in every area of my life, whether it's my career or sort of finances or whatever. And I'm still young, so I'm still noticing. And really, to be honest, I only honed in on this stuff sort of at the age of 23. Before that, I was kind of too focused on partying and all the other things that you do when you're young. And I sort of had that realization, and I didn't understand all the stuff I understand now, and started reading a lot more, and then I started applying it, and now looking back in hindsight, like, I have all these ideas about, okay, this is exactly what needs to be done, and I feel like my life's sort of representing that through the things that I'm doing. And I'm only going to continue getting better and better, and I hope that I can help a lot of people do the same thing. So that is the power of the 10x rule and why it's so important. Now, I think to sort of summarize that, I really like this idea of, like, when you know why, the what becomes irrelevant. And this is what the BHAG and the esoteric vision and the crazy, ridiculous goal within yourself, and having that clear why as to why you're doing things. For me, I want to be playing for Australia in basketball because I know that will allow me to understand what it takes to maximize human potential. I've sort of reached, or I will have at least attempted to have reached, the highest level of human performance in a particular field. And then I can comment from real experience to say, hey, look, this is what it takes. Whether I reach it or not, doesn't matter. I had an awesome time doing it. I learned a lot in the process, and I can give you real feedback on what it takes. And I helped a lot of people in the process as well. And I'm constantly realizing the information that I learned at university and the information that I'm reading can help a lot of people. And so that's sort of why, I feel like the importance of purpose is so important, because it allows me to do stuff like this, give back to people, and generate a life for myself in doing that. And also, the what is irrelevant. I don't struggle for motivation to go to the gym. I'm able to really, I feel like, look healthy, be healthy, feel great. And I never have to be worried about motivation or anything. I actually love going to the gym because I have this big sense of why. And instead of going to the gym, and I say this to people all the time, like, I'm the kind of guy who goes to the gym every day, but instead of just going to the gym just to look good, I'd probably be going to the gym about the same amount of time as I do now when trying to train to be a professional basketball player, as if I would just be training for general health and fitness. But instead of just training for general health and fitness, I'm training to be an Olympic athlete, and that's the difference. Like, I've got this sense of why. I'm like, well, if this pays off, then I get to travel the world, get paid to play a sport that I love, a child's game that I love, which is essentially like you feel like you're playing a video game when you're good at something. And I get to look great and feel great and all the rest because I've set out to achieve this goal, and I'm investing the same amount of time as I would if I was just trying to be optimally healthy, So why not aim big? And that's what I sort of say to people a lot. And, at the end of the day, like, as human beings, if we want to be optimally healthy, we have a body that is designed to be moving. We're designed to be walking sort of at least 16 Ks a day, and we're designed to be lifting heavy things and exerting ourselves. And while basketball is probably a bit towards the more extreme end, you know, if we're not moving as much as we used to, then we're not going to be ideally healthy. We're not going to look great. We're not going to feel great. So may as well aim for something that's fun and not even have to think about it. So that's sort of, I guess, like another tangent, but I think it's a really, really crucial and important idea. And so I'm just sort of running through the list to make sure I've covered everything. I guess like that's really the importance of intrinsic motivation, and why I say basketball really is life. There's so much more to basketball than just basketball. To be good at basketball, you have to master the mind. You have to master human performance. You have to master actually being physically strong. And there's a great quote from Socrates. It's sort of like, what a shame it would be for man to go his whole life without realizing the strength, that which his body is capable of. And it's like, well, it would be such a shame for people to be able to live their life and not realize, the amazing gifts that exist within their body because of the fact that, when you're strong and healthy and fit, it's the progress principle at work and it's human motivation at work, but it's also you're optimizing the chemical system that you live within. And so your happiness chemicals are on point. You feel great, you're in a good mood around the people that you're in, and you're able to live as long as possible, and you're able to give back to the people around you. And that's why, so sorry about that, I had another interruption, but really the destination isn't the goal. The goal is to enjoy yourself along the way. The goal is to understand, the principles of happiness. Understand that at the end of the day, we're just a chemical system, and there's a great great meditation from Mind Valley, and I'll link to that as well. I'm just writing a note there. So Mind Valley, and it's a great meditation that sort of allows you to separate yourself from your physical body and separate the ego from the physical body, and really realize that we aren't our emotions, and we are simply just a chemical system. And when we understand that, we can just say, well, awesome, I have certain things that allow me to be happy, and I'm just going to live each day and be as happy as I possibly can in each day, and strive towards a destination that sounds really, really cool to me and would allow me to create my dreams in reality because they exist for whatever reason they exist. And each day I'm just going to take actions to move towards them, and I'm going to know that that's what really is going to make me the happiest. And the only way you can actually know that is by doing it day in and day out, and then comparing how you feel on a day when you've trained really hard and worked towards your goal to when, a day when you've gone out drinking and you thought you used to be happy doing it, but then you realize that it was actually a superficial emptiness and there was no sense of purpose behind it. At least that's an example from my life. There might be other examples for other people. And forgive me for speaking in the context of a privileged, sort of young male, but there may be plenty of other examples of things that weren't purposeful. It could be spending time with friends who just don't enjoy spending time with, but you just do it just to hang out and shoot the kicker, So that is the concept of enjoying the journey, appreciating the process, and realizing that at the end of the day, we're just a chemical system that is going to appreciate progress and working towards a purposeful goal with autonomy and mastery. And all of the resources that sort of prove this stuff and show this stuff, and all the research that's been done has not been done by me. It's been done by great people such as Daniel Pink. And all of the links to that are within this module in the Elite Athlete Blueprint, at least the summaries of those books. And I highly, strongly recommend you reading those books in their entirety, and they will give you a fresh insight into all of this. But this is just the summary. And so with that said, the real key to success in basketball and success in anything is that intrinsic motivation. It's that desire to be better and not work towards external goals, because inherently our chemical system is governed or geared towards being great at the things that we want to do. And that is the real key to having a meaningful goal, and setting those goals and connecting with them, and then connecting with yourself. As the Supersonics, you'll have the opportunity to talk to each of us as coaches, but we can't tell you exactly what it is that you need to do. And if you find us doing that, then you're never going to achieve the maximum that you can, because you have to have an active mind. You have to connect with the things that you know that you want, and we can just guide you in the process. And so it's like that quote from Fountainhead talks about, and I'll put the quote in the start of this module. But we can't tell you what it is that is important for you, and it's that idea of the active mind of the video that I linked in the deep game. We can't tell you what it is that you need to do or you want to achieve. You have to determine that. And so, really, to sort of finish off, one of the key concepts I want to talk about, and there's a lot of people looking at me weirdly because I'm just walking around, but I don't really care. The idea is that when we sort of work towards our goals, and we have that sense of purpose, we get this feeling that everything is as it should be in this moment. And we know that, where we are right now is exactly where we should be towards working towards what we need to do. And whether you're spiritual or not, like I firmly believe that, when we have that feeling, we are where we need to be. And there is that sense of sort of faith that comes into it, or whatever you want to call it, faith or intuition or whatever, that's going to tell you, okay, this is what I need to do next. This is where I need to go. This is where I need to be. And so you're not worried about all of the other things that you could be doing. You're not worried about, I'm not at this party, and you don't have FOMO, or you don't have like, I'm not training with these people. It's like, okay, don't worry about that. You're where you need to be right now. And then when it comes to the next step, the answer will be presented to you as you go through. And the more you connect with spirituality, the more you realize that that's been sort of a common truth for the last however many years. We can expand on that later, but to sort of wrap up, really having milestones to be able to aim towards, having those 10x milestones of targets to reach is the key to you being able to achieve your goals. And then having the lead measures of, I'm going to train every day for this amount of time, and understanding how you can train with science. And that's sort of what we outline in the physical preparation parts of this elite athlete blueprint. But having those things to work towards, having the clear lead measures of things you're going to do every day to achieve these ridiculous targets that you've got set for yourself. And a great quote from an Olympian that I've heard of is, he just had a belligerent belief and belligerent targets for himself that he was going to be successful no matter what, and he made it happen. And that was Greg Rutherford. There's an interview of Greg Rutherford on London Real, and he sort of said that he was just going to achieve, and he just accepted that no matter what he would achieve, and he did. He won the gold medal in the long jump. And so I think it's really important just to have those targets, have those lead measures, and we outline the process of what you need to do. You need to be doing some kind of basketball every single day. You need to do 2 intense training sessions a week, 2 or 3 intense sort of game-specific training sessions a week, and then ideally probably your strength and conditioning stuff on the other 3 days, and then you have 1 or 2 days off. It'll vary depending on the level that you're at and how much you can tolerate, and you can work that out yourself or in the guidance of your coach. But as a general rule of thumb, that's a great way to sort of aim for it, and that's an example of the lead measures needed. And then you watch film and sort of follow the process of training that we outline. But when you do that, then you can set really cool sort of milestones along the way, like, okay, I need to make the state team, depending on what age you're at. I want to be aiming to make the state team, and then I want to be aiming to shoot the 3-ball at greater than 60% when open. I want to be the leading scorer on my team. I want to be making the national team. I want to be getting a college scholarship, and you have a clear target to work towards, and then you ask the right questions and you speak to the people you need to speak to achieve those goals. But we can't determine those goals for you because they're not going to be as meaningful as they can be. So that is a really good summary. I'm going to link to every single one of the great resources that I've come across within this. This lecture is going to be jam-packed full of information. There's going to be a summary sort of PDF of exactly what it is that you need to do step by step to set these goals, but you've got the full audio of the whole process of goal setting that I like to talk about, and you've got sort of this long form audio that you can listen to a couple of times at double or triple speed to really digest it all. It's okay if you don't get it all at once. It's sort of the summarized theory of motivation and achievement that I've come up with over the last 26 years of my life, and there's at least 10,000 hours of research that's gone into this, and it'll serve as hopefully the the manifesto for motivation for anyone who wants to achieve amazing things, and will constantly be added to, of course. And it's not the complete guide by any stretch of the imagination, but it is the most complete guide I've come across after, as I said, reading 1,000 books and doing a complete university degree in sports science, and then reading hundreds of research papers on motivation and human achievement. So all of those resources and information will be in the module. Let us know if you have any questions. I would love to expand on particular topics if you have the questions. If you want to summarize this and send it to me, awesome, so we can share it with people. I will maybe do that down the line. Don't forget to interact with us, ask questions. If you want to become a Sonics member, let us know. We'd love to have you, and you can access the Elite Athlete Blueprint in its entirety. But for now, keep striving hard. Remember to train every day and keep that mindset going. You want to be an elite athlete. Cheers.